The Bible Story in 16 Seas. People began to spread out over the whole earth. Different nations were formed, each with its own language. Abram, whose great way back grandfather was Noah, lived in a place called Haran with his wife Sarai. One day, God spoke to Abram and told him to take his family and leave. God told Abram he would use him to bless all the families of the earth. Even though he didn't know where God was sending him, Abram trusted God's word and went. God was about to start his plan to rescue people from the curse that came when Adam and Eve first sinned. Along the way, Abram sinned too, but God didn't leave him. When Abram passed through a land called Canaan, God appeared to him and promised to give the land to Abram and his children. God also told him that he would have so many children and grandchildren that they could not be counted, just like specks of dust on the earth can't be counted. But time went by, and still Abram did not have a son to fulfill the promise God gave him. But God didn't forget Abram. God spoke again and said, "Look up in the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many children you will have someday." God promised to give Abram's children all the land around them. God called his promise a covenant, like the promise he made with Noah about the rainbow. Abram believed what God told him. He put his faith in God's plan. And since God always keeps his promises, Abram could be sure he would one day have a son. The years continued until almost 25 years had passed since God called Abram to leave his home in Haran. It had been more than 10 years since God had first promised Abram that he would have a son. But Abram and Sarai still had no children. Everyone thought they were too old for it even to be possible. But when Abram was 99 years old, God spoke and reminded Abram of his promise. He even gave him a new name. Abram was now to be called Abraham, which means father of many nations. God told Abraham something very special. His covenant with Abraham would be an everlasting covenant, which means it was a promise that would last forever. God also changed Sarai's name to Sarah. God said that he was going to bless Sarah with a baby boy, and that when he was born, they should call him Isaac. A year later, Sarah gave birth to a baby boy. They called him Isaac, just as God had told them. Why did God wait such a long time to give Abraham and Sarah a child? Was it an accident or a mistake? No. It was on purpose, because God has a reason behind everything he does. God wanted everyone to know that Isaac was born because of God's special promise, not because of Abraham and Sarah's natural strength. God waited until they were so old that no one could doubt that Isaac's birth was a miracle of God. Today, everyone who believes in Jesus is adopted into God's family as one of Abraham's children. Because of what Jesus did on the cross, we can be forgiven of our sin and become part of God's family. The Bible Story in 16 C's.